In this video, we're going to look at how to scan reflective discs. And normally you see these on older CDs. And I've done a video in the past trying to deal with this. And the other video dealt with putting like film, some type of a film over the top of it. But that usually, it did get rid of the reflection, but it also adds a lot of like grain and just texture to the surface of the disc. And so I wasn't really satisfied with that. So I think I have another way that still has some compromises in the image quality, but I think it generally looks more natural. And so whenever you are scanning something that's highly reflective like this, the first thing you want to do is to make sure that there's no dust on it. You can start just using just a rag to physically remove dust, and then I use the canned air. This is from Walmart, but you can get it in electronic stores or Amazon. You might pay a little more on Amazon just for shipping something like this. And then also kind of make sure that there's no fingerprint reflections or anything like that. You can wash a CD that's printed, like that's been silk screened like this. You can wash this in the sink with like dish soap and do the other side, wash the other side too, because that way before you rip it, that'll just get any fingerprints or dirt off of the disc on the, on the back side. And then before you scan, you'll want to do the same thing with the surface, just to make sure there's no dust. And then you can also use, this is painter's tape. This can also be used to remove dust. The painter's tape is not very sticky, and so that's why it's one of the better ones. And then just kind of move it around. And then you can do a similar thing to the disc, but just be careful with that. All right, so first thing we're going to do is scan the disc in one direction, and then what we're going to want to do after that is then rotate it 90 degrees and scan it again. And you'll see the difference that it'll make when you scan it, the different directions. So first, I'm going to put the disc down in this direction with the font and the text pointing to the back of the scanner. And just be sure not to touch anything so you don't get fingerprints on there. I'm going to put a white background on this, mostly just for in the middle where the hole is, just so it has a more natural look to it. And then switching over to the computer, we'll scan this at 800 DPI, and I turn off all of the options and all that. That you don't really need this stuff. All right, so here we have the first scan. And if I open that, so you'll see what happens here when you scan a disk like this. You get this like a shift between lightness and darkness. And you can see that the lightness is along this plane, the long ways, and then the darkness is the shorter sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to physically rotate the disk 90 degrees so that we then get this lighter look along this side. So I'm just going to take this off. And then I usually put my fingers like this and then just rotate 90 degrees. Cover back on. And then scan it again. All right, so here is the second disk. So you can see we have the light is now over on this side of the disk and the dark is on this side. So we will start with here. I'm using paint.net just because it's pretty easy for doing this alignment stuff. But once you see the general idea of what I'm doing, you can use whatever software you're more comfortable with. And then I'm gonna cut out just this. I'm holding the shift button to anchor it to that original point that I started at. Okay. So I want to get this disk aligned. One of the ways you can do that is, so you say we've got, for 800 DPI, the disk is about 3,800 pixels in each direction. I can make a template that kind of helps with the alignment. So this is 3,800 by 3,800, so it's a little bit bigger than what the disk would be. And then I'll add a new layer. And I'm going to use a color that will be kind of hard to see here, but when you put it over a disk or something that has color, it'll be pretty easy to see. So this is just yellow. And so I'll show you, here's red. And I'm just going to make some squares like this. I'm going to go up and down, and then I'll come from the side. And basically, it's just going to make a really rough grid. It doesn't need to be perfect in any way. And then I'll just extend it off the screen a little bit there, off the canvas. And you only have to do this, you only have to make one of these once. And then you don't really have to do this, but you'll see what the benefit is of it. Okay. So I don't want the white background. I just want this clear. I want the clear background with the yellow lines. Save it as a PNG so that it saves, so it preserves this alpha, this checkerboard pattern. That just means there's nothing there. All right, flatten. So then now what you can do is when you're working on a disk like this, you can go to open and copy this whole thing and then add it as a layer and keep canvas size. We don't want to expand it. All right, so this just puts just kind of a rough grid over the object. So I selected the disk, label this disk 1, and then right click will let me rotate it. So there we go, that's good enough. All right, so now we're going to go over to this second one here. And just do the same idea. For here, we can probably just do a very rough image, rotate 90 counterclockwise. Copy this. Then reselect this bottom layer. Okay, so now this disk is also fairly aligned to the same grid pattern. I'm going to copy the disk, the whole layer, take it over to here. We don't need this alignment layer, so I'll get rid of that. And then I'm going to add it on top, keep the canvas size. Okay, so now we have the same disk, but different lighting. What we need to do is now align them on top of each other. And the way to do this, let me see, change this disk 2. We're going to change the opacity of this top one so that it's a little see-through. We want to be able to see what's below it. What we'll do is we'll go down here to one of the ends, and I hit escape, and then that way it can reset the selection, and then I clicked on the layer again. So I'm going to align it right there at the bottom, this Made in Japan area. And then what you want to do is take this little guy, this is the anchor for the selection, and move it down to that point where you just aligned. And now what you can do, see how this alignment selection is not totally, since I moved it a little bit already, if I hit escape and then reselect it, now it selects the whole image again. So I'll move that anchor down to there and then come up here, and then I can right click. I'm on the move pixels. If I right click, it'll let me rotate it. Now, I don't really understand why this is, but there's always a optical distortion between how the objects are aligned. So you see here, it's just physically a little bit different in the dimensions, the top disk from the bottom disk. So you have to stretch it just a little bit. And then when you do stretch it, that'll sometimes that'll make the bottom shift as well. Okay. All right, that looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. And then check your side to side. See the side. I'm going to reset the selection now that I've moved it around a little bit. You see it's not quite at the edge of the screen. But now that it's rotated, I don't really need to adjust anything here. And then you can use the arrow keys to move things just a little bit, kind of looking like right here, this red. You see if it shifts just a little bit, you can see the shadows go away. And so now the shadow is back right around there. Okay, so this looks pretty good, I think. And then if we go through, you see there's no shifting of the placement of the disc. There's just shifting of the lighting of the disc, and that's what we're looking for. So, so I returned the visibility, the opacity all the way back to full. So now I'm looking at the top layer 100%. And what I want to keep is the lighted side right here. But I don't want to keep this because underneath it is the lighted side here. So if I go over to here to the gradient, and then I do the linear, the reflected one. And so what this is going to do is it's going to keep what's in the middle, but fade out what's on the ends. And I will select transparency. And then I'm wanting to keep in this horizontal path, and I want to get rid of the vertical. So I'm going to start here in the middle, and then I'm going to drag this. Now, what I said, there is some compromises. What you do get is you get a little bit of a banding pattern that does show up. So it's not perfect, but I think that this looks much, much better. I'll hit finish here. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of distortion, but the surface quality of the disc is really good though. So, I mean, this is still almost perfect looking. So I think with a reflective disc, this is probably about as good as you're going to get of image quality with a, just the regular scanners that we have available to us. So now I will save this. I'm going to save it as a PNG, and the reason I want to do that is because I want to preserve this alpha transparency out here on the end. Okay. And then what I do is once it's in PNG, I'll open it up in a better or a more advanced photo editing. In this case, I like Affinity. I just like to use paint.net because you can very easily move images around, but when it comes to actually doing effects and cleaning up, it's not as good. But for moving stuff around, it's really well. The first one here, I'm going to do levels, and this will let me move stuff up. Now, for example, you can do the brightness here just to make it a little more reflective looking. Now, one of the things that I like about Affinity is that it has that levels adjustment as its own layer. So you see here, we made the disc look really nice, but this part got really oversaturated and it's just blown out. So what you can do is get the eraser, and then you can either go up here to the width and change this with the scale, but you can also use the bracket keys, and then you can move it to where it's about the same size as that circle. And so there you go. So now we've got the disc is cleaned up, but the circle still looks natural. And then I think in this case, the disc was pretty clean from a dust point of view. We can go through, make sure you select background, not erase. We want the clone stamp. And you can just erase some of these small little guys. Now in this case, you see this one right here, I selected the wrong area to begin with. So you want to make sure the direction of the band is like this. You can also see the hardness is also really high. I set that to a much lower number. It'll look more natural. All right, Control 0 will fully zoom out. And so there you go. Like I said, there is still this banding here. There's a little bit there, but I think it's probably as good as it's going to get. The next disc I wanted to look at was one that still has exposed reflective area, but mostly has a lot of printing. And so a disc like this is still going to be affected in the sense that some of the exposed area will be easy to see in the scan, but then in the other direction it might not be as easy to see. And so we can do the same trick with this one, and the banding will not be as noticeable because a lot of the area is printed, so you won't see those light interference patterns. So we'll do the same thing with this. And again, I'm going to set it down so that this area is pointing to the back of the scanner. And then, oh, before you do that, you just want to make sure there's no dust. I'll put the white background. Let's look at the disk, the image. All right, so see this, in this case, the dark looks really good. The dark side, that's what we'll want in this image. But then the lighter side looks terrible. You can't read that. So let's rotate the disk 90 degrees. So I'm just gonna put my fingers. This disc is a little, it's like stuck to the glass. I guess with all the printing on there, it did not want to slide very well. Here's the second version. So it looks better on the writing. All right, it's a little faded out right here. I don't know if that's it. It's still going to be readable, but that will probably transfer over when we do the fade. So if you wanted to be perfect, you might rotate the disc just a little bit and rescan it. But we'll go with this. It'll still look pretty noticeable. So I'm gonna just crop out to the circle of the disc. Use the ellipse select, and then I held shift up here to anchor it. Okay, we got that. All right, I'm going to open that align grid that we were using. Copy that. Paste it here. This one, this one actually looks pretty good. I think we'll leave that one alone. Then we'll paste it on here. Okay. So get rid of that. And then Control A, Control C. Delete that layer. And then add a new layer. Paste in top. Okay. We need to set the transparency. Now this one's going to be a little difficult because the text wasn't actually visible, so I think we're going to start over here instead. Doing this jazz rack symbol. I aligned it there just to start. Then I'm going to go grab the anchor, put it right over there, and go to the opposite side. Let's see, this looks about the best we can do. Right select, or right click, just try to bring it in. Now in this case, looks like we're going to have to shrink it down. Now when you resize over here, it does also change the position over here. So you don't want to always go exactly what looks good on one side. It might be a little too much on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to set this to the full, and then I'm going to take the gradient, make sure it's set to the reflected, change it to transparency. And since this is the top layer, I want to keep this darker print. I'm going to think I'm going to move the beginning point. Hit the escape key. I want this text right here in particular. Oh, hold on. It did set the, I just went Control Z. It did set the gradient. So I'm wanting more offset from the center. I want to keep this more. Now in this case, you can cheat a little bit because you have this nice solid pattern. Let me see. What I can do is go over to the eraser. I can go over to the eraser and we're going to lower the hardness and make this kind of big. I'm actually just going to erase parts of this. Let me see if we get rid of the gradient. Let's see if we don't even use the gradient. Let's just do this. I'm just erasing part of the image that I don't want. Okay, so there we go. I think that's actually better in this case. Still a little bit of light. Like I said, this part probably we would have had to rotate the disc just a little bit to get it to keep that in. But so I think that's actually probably better in this case. And you can see that makes a big difference. You can actually read the disc now. So I think that's a win on here. All right, well, I hope this gave you some ideas about how to scan a disc that's reflective and how to make it look better in the final output.